I still remember the first time I set foot in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The quiet hum of the Ohio River, the rustling of leaves in the gentle Appalachian breeze, and the warmth of the locals gave the town an almost surreal charm. But beneath its picturesque beauty lay a chilling secret that had haunted its streets for decades: the legend of the Mothman. Point Pleasant, a town rich in American history, witnessed the convergence of indigenous cultures and early settlers. The Battle of Point Pleasant in 1774, often cited as the first battle of the American Revolutionary War, left an indelible mark on its heritage. Yet, it wasn't the echoes of war that lingered in the minds of many, but rather the ominous figure that reportedly appeared in the shadows of the night. The first documented encounter with the Mothman occurred in November 1966. Two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry, along with Steve and Mary Millette, were driving near an abandoned World War II munitions plant known locally as the TNT area. What they saw that night would forever change their lives. Linda Scarberry later recounted, "It was shaped like a man, but bigger, maybe 6 or 7 feet tall. It had large wings folded against its back, and its eyes, they glowed red, like bicycle reflectors." Couples sped away in terror, only to realize that the creature was following them. "It kept up with our car, even when we hit 100 miles per hour, Steve Millette had said in an interview. Their story quickly spread, making headlines in the Point Pleasant Register. Couples see man-sized bird, creature, something. More sightings followed. Residents reported seeing the winged figure near the TNT area and even hovering above their homes. The creature's presence seemed to be an omen, a harbinger of doom. And then, tragedy struck. On December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio, collapsed during rush hour traffic. 46 lives were lost. The town was engulfed in grief. Many believed that the Mothman's appearances were a forewarning of the disaster. Was it a coincidence, or was the creature trying to warn them? Every year, the town hosts the Mothman Festival, drawing enthusiasts, skeptics, and curious souls from all over the world. The 12-foot-tall Mothman statue, with its menacing red eyes and outstretched wings, stands as a testament to the legend that refuses to die. But this story isn't about the past. It's about what I experienced when I decided to investigate the Mothman legend for myself. For the sake of privacy and to protect the town from undue attention, I've altered certain names and locations. But the events I'm about to recount are real, or at least, they felt real to me. This is my story. The first time I heard about the Mothman, I was just a kid flipping through an old paranormal magazine my uncle kept in his attic. The image of a dark, winged figure with glowing red eyes burned itself into my mind. Years later, as a freelance journalist with a penchant for the eerie and unexplained, I found myself drawn back to that haunting legend. I arrived in Point Pleasant in late October, the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. My plan was simple: interview locals, visit the TNT area, and write a piece on how urban legends shape small-town identities. What I didn't realize was how deeply entangled I would become in the very myth I sought to document. Point Pleasant's history is a tapestry woven with threads of triumph, tragedy, and mystery. The town's scenic beauty, with its rolling hills and meandering river, belies a past filled with conflict and sorrow. The Battle of Point Pleasant in 1774 was a pivotal moment in American history, but it also marked the beginning of numerous tales of hauntings and supernatural occurrences in the region. One of the earliest mentions of a winged creature predates the Mothman sightings by centuries. Indigenous tribes spoke of the Thunderbird, a powerful spirit believed to control the skies and bring storms. While not inherently malevolent, the Thunderbird's presence was often seen as a sign of impending change or disaster. Fast forward to the 1960s, and the Mothman became the modern embodiment of this ancient myth. The TNT area, once a bustling munitions plant during World War II, had long been abandoned, its crumbling structures overtaken by nature. It was here that the Mothman was most frequently seen. Mary Heyer, a local journalist for The Messenger, became a central figure in documenting the sightings. Her accounts painted a picture of a town gripped by fear and curiosity. She often received strange phone calls and had unsettling encounters with men in black suits, warning her to stop her investigations. One particularly chilling testimony came from a local farmer who claimed his dog vanished the night he saw the creature. It was just standing there, wings spread wide, eyes glowing. My dog ran after it, barking like mad. I never saw him again, he recounted with tears in his eyes. No story of the Mothman is complete without mentioning the Silver Bridge disaster. Built in 1928, the bridge was an engineering marvel for its time. But on that fateful December evening in 1967, it gave way under the weight of rush hour traffic. 46 people lost their lives, and the town was left in mourning. Some survivors reported seeing a large, dark figure near the bridge in the days leading up to the collapse. Others spoke of strange phone calls and premonitions. The legend grew, intertwining with the grief and fear of the community. To this day, debates rage on whether the Mothman was a harbinger of doom or a guardian attempting to warn the town. Skeptics dismiss it as mass hysteria, while believers continue to search for answers. As I delved deeper into the history and personal accounts, something unsettling began to happen. My dreams were plagued by visions of glowing red eyes, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. What started as a journalistic endeavor soon turned into a personal nightmare. This is not just an investigation, this is my descent into the heart of a legend that refuses to die. My name is Alex Carter, and if you had told me a year ago that I would be knee-deep in one of America's most infamous urban legends, I would have laughed in your face. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. I wasn't born in Point Pleasant, but my mother was. She never talked much about her hometown, brushing off my questions with vague answers. It wasn't until her funeral last year that I finally visited the place she once called home. That's when I first heard the whispers about the Mothman. I'm a journalist by trade, the kind who digs into stories that others are too afraid to touch. Paranormal phenomena, unsolved mysteries, urban legends, those are my bread and butter. But this story, this was personal. When I inherited my mother's old house in Point Pleasant, I thought it would be a good place to clear my head. What I didn't expect was to find her old journals hidden in the attic, filled with tales of strange sightings, mysterious phone calls, and a deep-seated fear that the Mothman wasn't just a legend. The more I read, the more I realized that my mother had been haunted by this creature long before I was born. And so I made a decision. I would stay in Point Pleasant, not just to unravel my mother's past, but to confront the legend that had loomed over this town for decades. The house was old, creaky, and smelled of dust and forgotten memories. Every corner seemed to hold a secret, every shadow whispered of things unseen. My mother's journal became my guide, leading me through the town's history and her own chilling encounters with the Mothman. My days were spent interviewing locals, some eager to share their stories, others too afraid to speak. Nights were the worst. The feeling of being watched never left me. The sound of wings flapping outside my window kept me awake. And the eyes, those glowing red eyes, haunted my dreams. I wasn't alone in this. Sarah, a local librarian with a fascination for folklore, became my closest ally. She introduced me to old newspaper archives, dusty books on Appalachian myths, and even a few townsfolk who claimed to have seen the Mothman themselves. But as we dug deeper, the line between myth and reality began to blur. Strange things started happening. My laptop would glitch, phone calls would drop, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was following me. I thought I was chasing a story, but now I fear the story is chasing me. The first time I truly felt the weight of the Mothman legend was in the dimly lit back room of the Point Pleasant Library. Sarah had pulled out an old leather-bound journal from the archives, its pages brittle with age. "This belonged to Mary Hyre," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. Mary Hyre, the journalist who had documented the original Mothman sightings. My hands trembled as I opened the journal, the faint scent of ink and time filling my nostrils. The journal was a treasure trove of information. Mary Hyre had meticulously recorded every sighting, every phone call, every strange occurrence that plagued Point Pleasant in the 1960s. Her words painted vivid pictures of glowing red eyes in the darkness, of terrified townsfolk who dared not speak out, and of the men in black who sought to silence her. One entry caught my attention. December 12th, 1967. 3 days before the Silver Bridge fell. I saw it again. Standing by the river, its wings spread wide. It knew what was coming. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just folklore. This was real. Despite the eerie details, a part of me clung to skepticism. I had chased too many ghost stories to believe everything at face value. Perhaps it was mass hysteria, a collective hallucination fueled by fear and tragedy. But as I dug deeper, interviewing locals and combing through archives, the pieces began to fit together too well. The sightings weren't isolated incidents. There was a pattern, a chilling consistency that defied logic. I tried to rationalize it all, until the night I saw the eyes. The library was empty when I left, the streets eerily quiet. As I walked back to my mother's house, I felt it, that unsettling sensation of being watched. I quickened my pace, heart pounding in my chest. Then I saw them, two glowing red eyes staring at me from the darkness. I froze. Time seemed to stretch infinitely, and then just as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished. That night my skepticism died. The legend was real, and I was in its grip. The days that followed my first encounter with those glowing red eyes felt like a waking nightmare. Every shadow seemed darker, every noise louder, every moment heavier with an unspoken dread. It started with small things. Lights flickering in the house, cold drafts even when windows were shut tight, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. My mother's old clock, which hadn't worked in years, suddenly started ticking again, always stopping at 12:15, the exact time the Silver Bridge had collapsed. Then came the sightings. Neighbors whispered about a dark figure hovering near the river, its eyes glowing like burning coals. Sarah told me she saw it perched on the library roof one night, wings spread wide as if ready to take flight. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head until I found the claw marks on my window frame. The marks were deep, jagged, and unmistakably deliberate. Whatever had made them had strength beyond human capability. I ran my fingers over the splintered wood, my mind racing through possibilities. Was someone trying to scare me, or was it something far more sinister? Night after night, the sense of unease grew. I heard whispers that didn't belong, footsteps that never led to anyone, and the faint rustle of wings just beyond my line of sight. The sound became so familiar that I started dreaming about it. Dreams where I stood alone in the TNT area, the Mothman's glowing eyes staring at me from the darkness, unmoving, unblinking. Sarah became my anchor in the madness, but even she wasn't safe. One night, she called me in tears, claiming someone or something was outside her house. When I arrived, I found her huddled in a corner, trembling. Her front door had deep scratches, too large for any animal. "This isn't just a story, Alex," she whispered. "It's real, and it's coming for us." I knew then that uncovering the truth wasn't just about my mother anymore. It was about survival. The Mothman wasn't just a legend. It was a curse, and we were its latest victims. The tension escalated when I started receiving anonymous phone calls. Static-filled silence on the other end, followed by a faint whisper, "Leave, before it's too late." I changed my number. It didn't help. One evening, while going through my mother's old journals, I found a page that chilled me to the bone. It was dated a year before I was born. I saw it again tonight. It knows I'm pregnant. It knows about Alex. I dropped the journal, my hands shaking. My connection to the Mothman wasn't accidental. It was generational. Determined to find answers, Sarah and I delved deeper into the town's history. We discovered forgotten tales of a winged creature seen long before the 1960s. Stories passed down through generations, whispered around campfires, and etched into the town's collective memory. One elderly man, Mr. Thompson, shared a particularly disturbing story. "I saw it once when I was a boy," he said, his eyes distant. "It doesn't just warn of disasters. Sometimes it causes them." As the days turned into weeks, the line between reality and nightmare blurred. I started seeing the Mothman everywhere, in reflections, in my peripheral vision, in the darkest corners of my mind. The final straw came when Sarah disappeared for 3 days. When she returned, she had no memory of where she had been. All she could remember was the sound of wings and the feeling of being watched. We were running out of time. The decision to confront the Mothman wasn't one I made lightly. Every instinct screamed at me to leave Point Pleasant behind and never look back. But I couldn't. not with Sarah's life unraveling before my eyes and my mother's past haunting me at every turn. I needed answers. Sarah and I began piecing together every scrap of information we had. Old maps of the TNT area, newspaper clippings from the 1960s, and my mother's journals became our guide. The more we uncovered, the more it became clear. The TNT area wasn't just where the Mothman was seen. It was where it lived. We gathered supplies, flashlights, cameras, voice recorders, and an old book of Appalachian rituals Sarah found in the library's restricted section. "If this thing is tied to the land," she said, "there might be a way to communicate with it or stop it." Our plan was reckless, maybe even suicidal, but we were out of options. The night we entered the TNT area, the air was thick with tension. Every step echoed in the silence. Every breath felt too loud. The abandoned munitions plant loomed ahead, its skeletal remains a monument to forgotten wars and whispered legends. We set up our equipment in one of the larger bunkers, the walls covered in graffiti and moss. Sarah lit a single candle, her voice steady as she read from the ritual book. "We seek the truth. Show yourself." Nothing happened. Then we heard it, the unmistakable sound of wings. The candle flickered violently before going out, plunging us into darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. And there it was, the Mothman. Its eyes glowed brighter than ever, piercing through the dark like twin beacons of dread. Its wings stretched wide, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Sarah clutched my arm, her breath shallow and rapid. "Why are you here?" I whispered, more to myself than to the creature. The Mothman didn't speak. It didn't need to. In my mind, I heard a voice, not words but feelings. Despair, warning, rage. It wasn't here to hurt us. It was here because something worse was coming. But before I could understand what that meant, the Mothman vanished, leaving behind only a chilling silence. We weren't done. Not yet. We spent the next few nights unraveling the meaning behind the Mothman's presence. Sarah found an old legend in the ritual book, speaking of a watcher, a creature cursed to forewarn humanity of impending doom. But sometimes the line between warning and causing disaster blurred. Our breaking point came when Sarah fell into a trance. Her eyes glazed over, whispering a single phrase repeatedly: the bridge, the water, the eyes. It wasn't over. Another disaster was imminent. The final night, we returned to the TNT area, desperate for answers. The Mothman appeared once more, and this time it spoke. Not in words, but in vivid images. A dam breaking, flooding the town, countless lives lost. We had to stop it. Armed with the ritual Sarah had discovered, we chanted under the cold night sky, hoping to break the curse. The Mothman screamed, a sound that echoed through the hills, before disappearing into the night. Had we succeeded, or had we only delayed the inevitable? The air was thick, with a foreboding silence as Sarah and I stood in the heart of the TNT area, the echoes of the Mothman's scream still lingering in our minds. The ritual was complete, but an unsettling feeling gnawed at me. Had we truly stopped what was coming, or had we only stirred the depths of something darker? The night was far from over. A sudden gust of wind blew through the bunker, extinguishing our candles and rattling the old metal doors. The ground trembled beneath our feet as if the earth itself was protesting our presence. Sarah grabbed my arm, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not over, Alex." From the shadows emerged a figure unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't the Mothman. This was something older, something darker, a manifestation of the very fear that had plagued Point Pleasant for centuries. Its eyes, like the Mothman's, glowed red, but there was no warning in them, only malice. We had summoned something we didn't understand. The creature lunged at us, its form shifting and flickering like a flame. I pushed Sarah behind me, raising the ritual book like a shield. My voice trembled as I recited the incantation she had found, the words foreign yet strangely familiar. The creature shrieked, its form writhing in agony, but it didn't retreat. It fed on fear, and we had given it a feast. "Keep going," Sarah urged, her hands clutching a silver pendant that had belonged to my mother. She joined me in the chant, our voices merging into a single desperate plea. The bunker walls shook violently, cracks spreading like spiderwebs. I could feel the weight of every soul lost in Point Pleasant pressing down on me. The bridge victims, my mother, every person who had seen the Mothman and never been the same. Then, silence. When I opened my eyes, The creature was gone. The air felt lighter, but the scars it left behind were deep. Sarah and I left the TNT area, our bodies exhausted and our minds heavy with questions. Had we defeated it, or merely delayed its return? Back in town, life went on as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Every time I crossed the bridge, I felt its eyes watching me. Every whisper of the wind carried its warning. I left Point Pleasant soon after, but the legend never left me. Years later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was my mother's journal, open to a page I had never seen before. They say the Mothman is gone, but I know the truth. It always comes back. And deep down, I knew it would. Thank you for being part of Forlorn Madness. Your likes, comments, and subscriptions keep me motivated to create more. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and stay scared. Subscribe now, and let's explore the madness together.